Hey guys, it is that time. I am recording my labor and delivery story. So if you are just tuning in, thank you so much for watching. So before I get started, I just want to say you might want to get yourself some popcorn, a drink, a snack, sit down because this will probably be a long video. Also, there is a warning, a disclaimer at the beginning of this video. There is some very controversial topics in this video that I'm going to discuss. One of them being castor oil. It is part of my labor and delivery story. So if you are against castor oil, I suggest you probably not listen to my labor and delivery story because I don't need the judgment. I have done tons of research on the subject. I've used it in the past, and it is part of my labor and delivery story. So if you're here to judge me, please just not even watch my video because all negative comments will be deleted. So let's go ahead and get into it. I am 1 week and 1 day postpartum, so 8 days postpartum, and I am talking from the top of my head as to what went down the day before and the day of my delivery. So things might be a little jumbled up, but I'm going to try to explain the best as I can. So on Monday, I was 37 weeks and 1 day. This was the 28th of January. I had my doctor's appointment. I was 0% dilated, not effaced at all. And I had a scheduled C-section for February 12th. But I had always wanted to go into labor on my own. I always wanted to experience labor. I wanted to experience my water randomly breaking because this would have been my 3rd C-section and I've never really experienced labor. So that's something I did want to experience since this is my last pregnancy. So I did a bunch of research. Like I said, I've used castor oil in the past, but this is where my story really begins, is with castor oil. I decided to make a pineapple smoothie with castor oil. I mixed in some chunks of fresh pineapple, some pineapple sherbet, and then 3 tablespoons of castor oil. And I did that around 3 p.m. I believe. I drank it all down and then just waited. I actually didn't have any ill effects from the castor oil in regards to having to use the bathroom. Like, I literally was so constipated that it didn't even help me go to the bathroom. So, yeah. I have been having tons of contractions for weeks, since 35 weeks. During the weekends, I would have painful, terrible, painful contractions, but they never amounted to anything. Like, I still was not dilating, I wasn't progressing, nothing was happening. So, yeah. I was in tons of pain in regards to, like, my uterus felt like it was like breaking apart. Every time I would move, every time I would get out of bed, I was just in so much pain that I wanted to get the process going to get baby girl out of me. I know lots of people are going to say, oh, you're so selfish for wanting your baby to come early. Call it what you will. I was in so much pain. I was early term. I was past 37 weeks. Caleb is in here saying hello to you guys. But I was just so ready to have her that I did try the castor oil smoothie. So nothing really happened throughout the day. Around 11 p.m. that same night that I had the castor oil smoothie, I started feeling kind of like Braxton Hicks contractions. They weren't painful, but they were beginning to be timeable, of every 2 to 3 minutes. So I did some bouncing on my yoga ball. I did some walking, but eventually I just went to sleep because I was tired. So around 1 a.m. the next day on the 29th. Okay, buddy. I woke up with painful contractions that, to me, they were about the same as what I had experienced in the previous nights of false labor, so I wasn't too worried about it. But I stayed awake that entire night, early morning, whatever. From 1 a.m. to 5:45, I was dead awake in pain. I took 2 baths that night, trying to make the pain go away. In my past experiences, when I've had that false labor pain, the pain would go away around 5 in the morning to 5:30. So I was just waiting for that pain to go away so I could go to sleep. We were actually expected to have like some snow that day, so the kids weren't going to school, so I wasn't really worried about being tired to drop them off at school. So I couldn't go to sleep. I was in so much pain because of the contractions. But anyway, I took a bath around 5:30 in the morning, and then I laid down around 5:45. And as I laid down, I heard this pop, and I felt this pop like my bones were literally breaking inside me. It was the worst pain I had ever felt in my life. And I'm sorry, my glasses look like super reflective at this point, and it's very distracting, but I apologize. But anyway, this pop I felt, I literally felt like something was breaking inside me. It was so incredibly painful. But right after that pop and that noise, I felt a little tiny bit of fluid come out of me, which I thought was very strange because I had just used the restroom a few minutes earlier. It was warm liquid. I was like, man, I wonder if my water broke. So I kind of did like a smell test. I put my fingers down there and got a little bit of fluid and smelt it, and it smelled like semen. And TMI, but I hadn't had sex in a few days, so I know it wasn't that. When my water broke with Liam, I was in the hospital being induced, and I remember it smelling exactly like that. So I was like, oh my god, I think my water broke. I wasn't exactly sure because it was just such a tiny, tiny amount of fluid. There was no big gush. There was no like terrible leaking. It was just that little tiny bit that had kind of like seeped out. So after that terrible pain that I had and a little bit of fluid, I ended up going to the bathroom, sitting on the toilet, and a little bit of more fluid came out. And I was like, okay, I really think my water broke. And right after that, I started having the worst contractions of my life. They were so incredibly painful. I was like, okay, I have to go to the hospital. Even though this is false labor, I really, really have to go to get some type of pain management. So I woke my husband up. This was all about 5:45 in the morning. Woke the kids up, hurried up and got them dressed. At this point, I was crying in pain because the pain was just unreal. It was like something I've never felt before. So we hurried up. My husband was like in panic mode. He was rushing the kids to get dressed so he can drop them off at my parents' house. He had the emergency lights on in the vehicle. Luckily, the hospital is literally only 3 minutes away from my house and about 5 minutes away from my parents' house. So we didn't have that far to travel. But I just remember those minutes were just painful. Terribly painful. So we dropped the kids off. We made it to the hospital. My husband dropped me off at the front emergency room entrance. He went park the car. He met me, and as I was waiting, I was just breathing through the contractions. I was crying. It was so, so bad. Okay, so baby sister woke up, so I'm gonna nurse her as I finish telling my story. So, I think where I left off, we walked up to labor and delivery. We just completely bypassed emergency, went straight to labor and delivery. So I told the nurses what was going on. I told them that I was having painful contractions. I think my water broke. And I was a scheduled C-section for 2 weeks from now. So they took care of me pretty quickly. I signed paperwork to get set up. They sent me into triage, hooked me up to the monitors and everything. They took a swab of my vaginal fluids to test to see if my water leaked. And I just pretty much waited in the triage for 30 minutes or so while my test was coming back. I was having noticeable contractions on the monitor, and the nurses kept telling me, I'll give you some pain medicine in a second. We're just going to wait to see how your swab came out. By this point, it was like almost 7 o'clock, and lucky me, my doctor does her surgeries on Tuesday morning around 7:30. So I knew my doctor was already at the hospital. Around 7 a.m. she came into my room and she said, your water did break. We're going to go ahead and prep you for surgery, and you're having your baby today.
Mommy, sit.
So, they got my IV in. It took them 3 tries and 3 different nurses to get my IV in. It was like the most painful experience out of the whole contractions, C-section, all of that. So they got my IV in, they shaved the area, and by 7:30 I was in the operating room. Obviously they do the spinal, you know, all that good stuff. So when I was in surgery, it was fine. I didn't feel anything, obviously, but there was one scary moment that happened. So my doctor was cutting through the layers to get to my uterus, and all of a sudden she says, oh shit, there's the baby. And I didn't really think anything of it at the time. I thought it was very weird that my doctor would say, oh shit. I mean, to me, I wasn't offended, but it was really weird for her because she's very professional, and it's just not something that would come out of her mouth. But then right after that, she said, there's the baby, the uterus ruptured. At this time, they were kind of whispering. My doctor and the assisting physician were kind of like whispering to each other. And I did hear my uterus ruptured. At that point, I was just like bawling my eyes out, crying. Within seconds, baby was out. She was crying. They whisked her away. They checked her. Her pediatrician was already in the room with me before she was even born. After she was out, the pediatrician came to talk to me. She said, your baby's doing great. She's with dad. She's warm. She's fine. At that point, I felt a little bit better. I knew that baby was fine. I didn't know the severity of a uterine rupture and how much, how scary that actually was to me. I didn't think it was really that big of a deal. It did take a little bit longer to complete surgery because I was getting my tubes tied at the time, and I guess my doctor had to repair my uterus. But anyway, after my husband was with baby and everything, my doctor asked me, she's like, are you awake? I'm like, yeah, I'm awake. She's like, well, your uterus ruptured. She's like, you are very, very lucky. Things could have gone way downhill from here. She's like, it must have literally just happened as you were on the operating table, because if not, you and baby would have not been okay. So we are lucky that we were perfectly fine. She said if this would have happened at home, there was a risk that I would have lost my uterus, I would have lost my bladder, I would have lost my own life, and I would have lost baby's life. Now, I asked the doctor, why did this uterine rupture happen? And I already knew the answer, but I wanted to, I wanted to just make sure that I knew the reason, so I asked her. And she's like, well, the labor caused the uterine rupture since you have had 2 previous C-sections. Your uterus was pretty thin from the beginning, and it just caused your uterus to break open. I mean, the contractions caused your uterus to break open. The castor oil in itself had nothing to do with the uterine rupture. If I would have went into labor on my own anyway, it would have happened. So, you know, if you would ask me, do I regret taking the castor oil? I don't, because everything came out fine. There was a risk of uterine rupture if I would have went into labor anyway. Oh, sister. Okay, so I have to put Caleb out of here. I put baby sister down so I can fully talk. They were being very, very distracting. The last thing I talked about was if I regretted taking the castor oil, and my answer is no, and that is because if I would have went into labor on my own anyway, the uterine rupture probably would have happened anyway because I've already had 2 previous C-sections. So, like I said, things could have been terribly, terribly wrong, but everyone kept saying, you have a guardian angel for you and your daughter because you were here and the rupture just happened right as you were on the table. So we were able to save you, your uterus, your bladder, your baby girl, like everything was so amazing, and I feel so blessed that everything came out the way they did. So, castor oil did induce my labor. It did cause me to have a uterine rupture, but it could have happened anyway. I would not say the castor oil had any ill effects on my labor because I can't say that that was the cause of it. So anyway, I had the surgery, everything was fine. I got my tubes clamped, so no more babies for me. It probably would have been a terrible, terrible idea to ever get pregnant again since my uterus was so thin and it did rupture. So no more babies for me ever again unless it's like an immaculate conception or my clamps fail for some reason. But for me to get pregnant again, it would be very, very unsafe. The recovery has, considering what happened with my uterus, the recovery was not that bad. The first 2 days, I wasn't in that much pain. Of course, I was taking pain medication. I still am at this point, being a week postpartum. I am taking pain medication because I do get sore throughout the day. But my recovery so far has been the easiest in this 3rd C-section, which I thought was very crazy considering my uterus busted open. We had to fix that and getting the tubes tied and everything. So yeah, that is how my labor and delivery story went. So at 3 p.m. I took the castor oil and the pineapple. At 1 a.m. I was woken up with, painful contractions. By 5:45 a.m. my water broke, and by 7:30 I was in the OR and my baby was born at 8:15. So, if you go and watch my previous videos, I've always wanted to talk about me wanting to experience labor and my water breaking and everything. Well, I experienced that and I was nuts for ever wanting to experience that because it was the most painful thing I had ever experienced in my life. I felt like my uterus was going to bust open. I have nothing to compare to in regards to labor. I don't know if I was in so much pain because my uterus was so thin. I don't know if it was because the castor oil made my contractions so strong, but it was just a terrible pain. I was literally crying and moaning and groaning in the triage room. I was so embarrassed, but there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. It was so incredibly painful. As soon as the spinal kicked in, I felt so much better. I was so thankful to be in that OR room having my baby. So yeah, that is my labor and delivery story. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me. Like I said, if you have anything to bash me about or any negative comments, they will not even be approved. But for my followers who are here to support me, thank you so much for being here for me and understanding my decisions and just being there for me in my whole journey as to what happened. I will be doing a postpartum update very, very soon, probably recording it either today or tomorrow. So I think that is it for my labor and delivery story, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.